Hello there, I'm Josh and I make music under the name Pendown, and in this video I'm going to show you how I recreated a track called Doubt by a band called 21 Pilots. This is actually the second time that I'm recording this video because for some reason I've messed up the first one. But anyway, last week 21 Pilots celebrated the 10th anniversary of their album Blurry Face. I can't believe it's been 10 years already. But it is what it is. I thought that would be a great opportunity to recreate this song right here. And yeah, let's dive right in. Okay, let me start by playing you a part of the song so you can hear the recreated version. Don't forget about me. Don't forget about me. Even when I doubt you, I'm no good without you. No. So for me personally, recreating tracks like this is probably the best way to learn how to not only produce but also write, arrange a song like, the big artists do. And whenever I do a cover like this, I always try to think of like a goal, something that I want to learn. Maybe it's like the mix or the arrangement of the song or the whole layering of all the different elements or a specific sound like the drum sound or the vocals. What I hear on the album is like all of these tracks, they are arranged in a pretty simple manner. What I mean by that is like it always feels to me like there are not that many elements in each of those songs, including this one, but like each element is doing its job. If we look at this here, there isn't a whole lot going on, and that is basically also what I learned from recreating this song here. The first thing here is this main synth. That same theme is repeated throughout the whole song, as you can see here. I searched for a preset in Alchemy. To me it seemed a little bit thin, so what I did, basically I just slapped some overdrive on here, some saturation, took out all of the lows and all of the highs so it doesn't get in the way of anything else. Also used some room reverb to make it a little bit wider, and that's kind of how I got there. It was still kind of missing something for me, so I found this room guitar with some effects on it that I kind of used to layer it underneath this main synth here. What you can do is just layer different elements to get to that sound that you're looking for. The overall sound of the guitar, you can barely hear it together with the main melody, but it was just like adding a little extra to that sound. The next element coming in is the piano, which I used the Addictive Keys software instrument for, and I ended up with the Modern Upright preset, tweaked it a little bit, and went with that. I added a chorus effect just to get the piano a little bit wider than it already was. Then next up, right after the intro, there is the drum kit coming in. Pretty basic, but together with like this next synth, it really builds some tension going into that verse. What's happening here is basically the main melody again that we heard in the intro, but a slightly different variation of it. I think like some notes were left out, and there is obviously like a different sound going on with the synth. And then there's also like this crash on here. I duplicated the audio track and reversed it. I think they did that over and over again, as you can see here on these two tracks. One quick thing I forgot to mention here in the interlude, or leading into it actually, again, another transition effect, if you will, is this little snare roll right here. That's kind of an overkill, by the way. What I could do here to save some, CPU power is basically bounce that track in place and just like leave it as an audio file, since the only thing that I use from that drum kit is this snare roll right here with a little bit of reverb on there. Next up is the verse, and that's where things start to get interesting because vocals makes everything better, I think. We have the same drum kit as we had going on in the interlude, but this time the main melody is played by yet another element, which is this plucked synth up here. And again with a slight variation in the melody, but basically the same theme, just a little bit more subtle in the background. And then there is also bass going on. And I use this preset here called Blooming Bass because I'm pretty sure that's exactly the one they used on the original track. It didn't sound quite as big as I wanted it to, which is why I layered it with a sub bass. The next element is this guitar here, playing just a D note, which is, I think, the root key of the song, adding yet another transition effect, so to speak, to lead into that next chorus. It's pretty interesting on this production. As a listener, you're constantly led into like the next part by some kind of transition effect. And also like there are no 4 bars where not something new is introduced, of keeping you listening to this song. Again, I think the arrangement is very like simple in a way and almost minimalistic, so there is not a lot going on. The good thing is that leaves enough space for the vocals. There is a lot of saturation on the vocals. I went with my go-to vocal chain that I know to work for myself, which is oftentimes I put like a pitch correction on there, but in this case I turned it off. I have an EQ on there taking out a lot of the lows, some mids and highs even. And then I have a first compressor, which basically just is there to kind of tame like the peaks in volume. I set that to a gain reduction of about 3 dB, so whenever something really loud comes in, kind of ducks it down a little, makes sure like the whole take is more or less on the same level. Followed by a de-esser. And then what I like to do is having like that first compressor followed by overdrive. And after that one, that's kind of like my holy trinity right here. Compressor into overdrive into yet another compressor. Long story short, that's how I mix my vocals, and I applied the same here in this track. And then the last thing I did was I put the Fresh Air plugin on there just to bring out some of the highs. When I look at it right now, I think I went a little bit overboard here with these, but that's okay. And then like the next thing, there is a tape delay on a separate track with a quarter note delay. And there is also, I think, some reverb going on, but like both dialed in very low.
Scared of my own image, scared of my own immaturity, scared of my own ceiling.
Whole track.
Scared I die of uncertainty, fear might be the death of me. Fear leads to anxiety, don't know what's inside of me.
And then we're already at the first chorus where everything kind of comes together. Top to bottom, we have the piano that happened before, we have the bass, the drum kit with a additional snare on there, with a huge reverb on there. Again, we have like the main synth, but this time layered with this bell synth right here. The guitar I mentioned in the verse before is doing the exact same thing, just playing that D note. And another thing I almost forgot is like this little pad right here, which adds yet another layer to the whole production. In addition to all of that, what we have here is a crash, and then also some white noise effect going on, you know, that sound. There is also a gang in the background, which makes it sound really hip-hop or whatever. I went with pretty much the same vocal chain like I used for the rap vocals in the verse, except this time I left the pitch correction on. I think they used it as a style element or whatever on the vocals. So I thought that makes my job even easier, because then I don't have to record the perfect tracks, can use that plugin right here and get away with it. What I've showed before is this one right here, which is the tape delay and the reverb. But in addition to those, a vocal doubler, just to widen the vocal, another send using the pitch shifter set to mono. And then on the left side, what I do is I tune the vocals down 5 cents, and on the right side, I tune them up 5 cents, which again adds another element of width to the vocal. It's very subtle, so let me just overdo it like with this vocal doubler here. About me, don't forget about me. It's almost like a chorus effect. Let me do the same with the pitch shifter here. About me, don't forget about me. A very similar effect, but I think the pitch shifter to me sounds more like a snapback delay. So in addition to the lead, what I have is like 2 doubles on separate tracks, 1 pound to the left, 1 pound to the right. I have a half note delay to give it even more depth. On all of these, I use the quarter note delay and the reverb a little bit more than in the verse. One special thing that is happening in this song right here is the word about is kind of, split, which is a fun effect. Basically, I took the track, I split it and just kind of repeated it on there.
Don't forget about me, even when I doubt you.
This interlude happening again, and I think not much has changed, like maybe a little something in the drums and the rhythm played there. Second verse, what is happening here is a slight variation in the vocals, so that's kind of where you get that feeling of something new is happening from in this case.
Temperature is dropping, temperature is dropping. I'm not sure if I can see this ever stopping.
This time around, like the guitar is there playing the D note repeatedly and to kind of lead into that next chorus. So there's an EQ on there, and what I did is I automated the high cut right here, and what that basically does is it kind of opens up the whole sound. Next up is the second chorus. Again, it's the same happening as in the first chorus, except for like a little change in the vocals, but that's about it. Then what we get is the bridge, and here we can hear like that same piano as we heard like in the intro and in the chorus, just playing on its own.
Going on the bishops, claw way up the system, repeating simple phrases, someone holy insisted.
This bridge right here, it's kind of like a third verse to me, or because like the vocal melody doesn't change a whole lot. It's just like a different feeling, I guess, just the piano playing and then slowly the main melody coming back in together with this pad right here. What I mentioned in the beginning is that they didn't use a whole lot of different elements, in my opinion. And it's a very simple arrangement. And it just kind of shows that if you find the right sounds and arrange them accordingly and make a good production with that one, you can basically just reuse them and in different combinations together throughout the song. Because often what you start with is like a 4 or 8 bar loop, and you have like all these elements layered on each other, and basically what you need to do to get like to the next thing is like take apart like the 4 or 8 bar loop and then just start reintroducing those elements one after another again, and then you have a whole song. So that's kind of the theory there. So one thing that's happening here in the interlude, just a neat little effect, is again we have like this synth going on right here. And then at the very end, we have this like slowed down effect. I basically just like took that last part here of the synth, I bounced it down to a separate track, and then here in Logic Pro, instead of a fade out for the volume, what you can do is you can add a slow down instead, which is the curve that you can see here. And then we're already at the end of the song. We have this synth from the interlude playing together with the main synth. These different elements that were spread out throughout the song now all coming together. So what happens on the second repetition of the chorus is we have some strings and organs, and I'm not sure if there's a choir too coming in the background and leading up like to the big climax of this song right here. And then also like the lead melody from the lead vocal, a bit different than in the first repetition, kind of, a lot of variation going on there. But what's even more interesting is what is happening in the third repetition of the chorus. And it's basically just like a gang vocal going on in the background. And what the second gang does, it's kind of like a call and response thing happening here with the gang vocals. Leading into the outro, which is basically like the gang call and response going on and slowly fading out. It's like this EQ trick again, but happening in the different directions. So instead of like opening everything up, what's happening here is like kind of, everything shutting down. And the same is happening to the guitar right here. And we have like one more element that's introduced here, which is just a very deep bass, repeating the same rhythm that the drums had before. And that is basically it for the whole production. I'm aware that I didn't go into like much detail for some of the elements. Like I said, like the whole purpose for me was to figure out like how a song like this is arranged, and I was kind of surprised to see how simple things actually are, because it's always easy to slap yet another effect, yet another layer on your song, instead of trying to make the different elements count on their own, and then also like bringing them all back together again to create that huge climax of the song. It's very interesting to see in that song in particular, and as always, it was a lot of fun to recreate. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, let me know. And also, if you want to check out my original music, I will put another link in the description. Bye bye.